Sthaha Sutam me ma prakasihi Anena dhiti inahu ratran sandadhami Ritam badishyami Satyam badishyami Tanmamavadu Tadvaktaramavadu Avatu mam Avatu vaktaram Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May our speech be based on the truth. May our mind, our word and thoughts and ideas be based on the absolute reality present in all of us. So today's topic is Sri Sarada Devi, an alternative feminine paradigm for the modern world. It's a very intriguing subject, the three great spiritual personalities behind the Vedantic tradition are Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swami Vivekananda. Of these, it's easy comparatively to speak on Vivekananda because Swami Vivekananda was not only just a spiritual teacher or a prophet, but he was in many ways a social reformer. You hear and you read a lot about history, social reform, women emancipation, even feminism, human rights, national reconstruction, spreading education and literacy. You find synthesis of the Eastern and Western values, the synthesis of spiritual values and modern technology. All these you find in Vivekananda, which are more or less of contemporary relevance. In fact, we read every day in our newspapers many of the ideas that in a rather remote sense Vivekananda hinted, for example, making use of the gifts of science and technology for the welfare of humanity instead of using them for mutual destruction. Mutually assured destruction is what keeps us safe in today's world. With all the nearly 18,000 nuclear warheads we have, the Soviet Union alone had more than 48,000 when it collapsed. So today's world is being preserved on the promise of mutually assured destruction. So you hear about Vivekananda talking about the need for using modern technology for creative, constructive purposes. So it is rather comparatively easy to approach Vivekananda. And for Sri Ramakrishna, of course, it is less easy, but certainly not as difficult as approaching Holy Mother. Because Sri Ramakrishna talks a lot about many of the contemporary issues of our times. The need to pray, the need to meditate, the need to take the holy name, many such ideas, and also a lot of interfaith conversations. You read in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I think he was the originator of the interfaith dialogue in a way. So it's still somewhat easy comparatively to approach Sri Ramakrishna. But what do you talk about Holy Mother? She was not an academic like Vivekananda, and she was not a regular a conformist saint the way Sri Ramakrishna was looked upon, but she was much more than all this. A widow in those days, you can imagine. That is the 19th century India, the later part of 19th century, later half of 19th century. A widow in India was, on the one hand, was a revered figure. On the other hand, she was a suffering person. So in Holy Mother's life, you find a unique combination of rustic simplicity, straightforwardness, modesty, humility, which characterized the typical Orthodox conservative feminine personality of the late half of 19th century, the later half of 19th century. When I mentioned this humility, it was not a kind of assumed humility. You can be very humble in conversation, but extremely proud within. It is possible. It was not a kind of assumed simplicity. That's why it is rustic, real simplicity. In fact, Lord Krishna makes a point in the Gita, it's better to be straightforward than deliberately humble. You heard of the story. A small little boy was given an award, the humblest boy award in his school. He was so humble, so self-deprecating, and showed a higher degree of maturity than his friends. But next day, he hung the award on his neck and displayed it, and the award was taken away from him. He got the humblest boy award, an award for humility, but that award he displayed, he paraded, and it was taken away from him. So when you are humble and you also want to convince other people of how humble you are no more humble. I'm not talking about the traditional British conversational style, So it is not assumed humility, rustic, natural humility. And how did it impress a person like Miss Margaret Noble? You can get just a glimpse of Holy Mother's personality. Maybe I think the best judge of Holy Mother's personality from a Western perspective was Sister Nivedita, who was born Miss Margaret Noble, who was a firebrand orator, educationist, and her family had played an important role in Irish, the problems of Northern Ireland, Irish land question, the struggle between Protestants and Catholics was plaguing Ireland, Northern Ireland for centuries. So she was coming from an extremely well-educated, non-conformist background. And she happened to be the greatest Western admirer of Holy Mother. And she writes that will give a glimpse into the personality of Holy Mother, whom we are going to discuss now. Miss Margaret Noble, this Irish revolutionary-minded intellectual, teacher, educator, and a spiritual person, she was a spiritual person essentially, writes, I have never known her hesitate in giving utterance to large and generous judgment, however new or complex might be the question put before her. Her whole experience is of theocratic civilization. Now, Holy Mother was literally the head of this vast Ramakrishna Mission organization, which today has more than 206 centers spread all over the world, with more than 2,000 monks. She was the head of that organization after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away. She was the guru. And she herself was barely educated. She could read and write, that's all. And she could guide this organization, which was founded by Vivekananda, who was arguably one of the greatest intellectuals of 19th century, and perhaps the best and the most well-educated graduate of the university where he studied. And Vivekananda himself could not question mother's judgment in administrative matters, mind you, not only spiritual matters. When the huge organization was facing problems, mother was the last judge. So when you become a spiritual person, many of the skills that you learn in the university, the school, in management schools, they become natural to you, and much more than that, you get a transcendental vision, a transcendental glance into everything in this world, into reality of everything. Because every science, every branch of learning is a manifestation of that supreme knowledge, which is the highest definition of the archetypal divine motherhood in Hindu tradition. I shall explain what I said just now. In one of the most sacred religious textbooks in India is the Chandi, which is called Durga Saptashati. It's 700 verses. There is a statement, Vidya samasta stava devi bhedaha striya samasta sagala jagatsu. The meaning is, Vidya means branch of learning. You can imagine management science, avionics, shipbuilding, everything. And also religious scriptures, philosophy, theology, everything. All branches of learning are various manifestations of the divine mother present in all of us. And all women folk are different manifestations of the divine mother. This is the essence of this particular Sanskrit statement, Sanskrit verse which I quoted just now. Vidya samasta stava devi bhedaha striya samasta sakala jagatsu. So, when you look upon a woman as an assertive, aggressive, human rights exponent, as a feminist, firebrand orator, that is wonderful. But mother tells you there is a higher and much more transcendental way of asserting womanhood, which no man can question. I mentioned just now, Vivekananda was one of the greatest intellectuals of 19th century and one of the greatest spiritual teachers India ever produced, maybe the world has produced. That Vivekananda asked his mother's blessings before taking a decision to come to America to speak in the Parliament of Religion. So what was the source of that supreme authority, authenticity, the masterful dimension of motherhood? That's what Sister Nivedita is writing about. I have never known her to hesitate. Many people went to Holy Mother, asking questions not only about spiritual matters, even about running the organization of which she was the guru. She never hesitated. Which means when you become spiritually illumined, you get a natural glance into, a peep into the essence of everything, every question that you deal with. You become you obtain a peculiar common sense, a spiritual common sense, which is the most wanting thing in today's world. You find the best educated people don't have common sense frequently. And that really leads to that failure. But, so when you meditate, when you evolve in spiritual life, more than anything else, more than attaining what we call God realization, you acquire a peculiar, fundamental, a transcendental common sense, which helps you even to run your household better, which helps you to run a big organization like this better. So can you think of a higher stature that a human being can attain than this ideal of motherhood, the spiritual ideal of motherhood? That is the paradigm that mother presents before you. So no woman can try to be, can equal a man in physical appearance, in intellectual faculties, in all other skills, she can become. No man can be equal to woman, and no woman can be equal to man in the superficial the external details. But there is one stature which mother alone can attain, which woman alone can attain, that is the ideal of universal motherhood, which is what really impressed an English lady, a British lady, an Irish lady who met her for the first time. And they didn't know each other's language even. That's an interesting thing. They did not know each other's language. I shall give you an idea, the philosophical or spiritual background of this aspect from an ancient Indian tradition. You know, there is in one of the greatest lawgivers of Vedic tradition was Manu. And Manu says, the verse which I am quoting, and I shall try to explain. Ubadhyaya dashacharya acharya tu shatampida sahasrena adhigam pidhu gauravena atirichide. The greatness, the stature of mother in the family is mentioned here, in ordinary family. So Ubadhyaya is somebody like a guest lecturer. When you go to city college to give a lecture, maybe 10 times a year, you are called an Ubadhyaya. Acharya is maybe called a professor, head of the department. So the respect you give to an Acharya, a professor, is 10 times the respect you give to a guest lecturer. The respect you give to your father is 100 times as much as the respect you give to a professor. The respect that you give to mother is 1,000 times as much as the respect you give to father. This is a kind of very interesting description in the Manu's Smriti is called a law book. That's why a student who completes his education in the Vedic hermitage and who is about to return to his home to start his life as an householder, marriage, children, and responsibilities of family life, social life, an ideal citizen, ideal father, brother, sister, whatever may be. The first instruction that the teacher gives, it's a kind of convocation address, is Matru Devo Bhava. The instruction continues Matru Devo Bhava, Pitru Devo Bhava, etc. You should honor and respect your mother as much as you honor and respect God himself. This is the implication. So, when a woman reaches this stature, going beyond the physical, the biological, the intellectual, the psychological, and reach the transcendental spiritual dimension of motherhood, then there is nothing in the world that can resist her. So that's what Sister Niveda writes. Her whole appearance is of theocratic civilization. Yet she rises to the height of every situation. Sister Niveda is writing about the ancient, the Hindu traditional family structure which she represented, Holy Mother represented as a woman, but as a mother, she represented the highest feminine paradigm that you can evolve. The only sign is a strange, quiet intensity that comes upon her face. Does one carry to her the same perplexity or mortification born of social developments beyond her kin? With unerring intuition, she goes straight to the heart of the matter and sets the questioner in the true attitude to the difficulty. I am going to discuss a few more details about her, the way she trained her disciples in spiritual life. I am here giving an example of how Holy Mother responded and resolved many of the questions that ordinary people will not be able to respond. You may be the best graduate of the management school, but there may be another graduate, so you cannot strike a deal. The other man also knows your tricks, your methods, so it doesn't work. But before a mother, management skills are not necessary, they are totally irrelevant. That's why Holy Mother, Sister Mary writes that when they put some of the most difficult questions to Mother, she could resolve it. And she continues, or is there not need for severity? No foolish sentimentality causes her to waver. So, all faculties of judgment, a unique power, strength and authority and authenticity, and irresistibility of the divine motherhood. That's what she reads here. Now the same mother, I can give an example how she responded to some questions put to her by some of her disciples. It seems that it happened on two different occasions. On one occasion, some disciples went to Mother and asked her, I have been praying, meditating, taking the holy name for decades, but nothing is happening to me. One group of disciples asked this question. And Mother said, well, do you think just because you are doing a lot of spiritual practice, God should appear before you? So you are paying a price. You go to Trader Joe's, you pay a fixed amount, you are given something equivalent. Is spirituality, God realization, spiritual growth, something like this? Is it something that you can buy in the market by paying something? You practice, you pray, you meditate for so many hours, for so many days, so God should appear before you. So mother wants to demolish that wrong idea, the wrong conception, the wrong, the misunderstanding in the minds of the devotees. So mother tells, spirituality, God realization, God is not something that you can buy the way you buy fish or vegetable in the market. Everything happens by God's grace. So the grace aspect in spiritual life is emphasized in this conversation. You may work hard, but if you say, well, I have worked hard, I meditated, so let God appear before me. It doesn't happen that way. So mother says that. So she is emphasizing the importance of God's grace. In another context, another group of devotees approached Mother and put a different question. Well, Mother, you said so many times, everything happens by God's grace. So I don't have to work hard. There is nothing that we need to do or we could do. Then Mother gave another approach to spiritual life. She says, you have to work hard. See, I'm doing japa meditation for so many hours every day. You should work hard. You should be up and doing. There's a language in the translation that uses. And you should work hard. God's grace is there, but you should work hard. So you find a unique blending of God's grace and human effort. The point is, God's grace is there, but unless we become grace-worthy, unless we evolve those qualities which enable us to appreciate God's grace as God's grace, it doesn't work. So human effort as a role, God's grace as its own role. Human effort, our prayer, our meditation, our spiritual sadhanas enable us to refine our mind, to become grace-worthy. Then only grace becomes useful. So you find this unique synthesis. Of course, these ideas in the scriptures, but these ideas come to Mother so spontaneously. That's what we find in these conversations. So that's why it's, a kind of spiritual common sense. That is what you find in this, in Holy Mother's life. Now, perhaps there are a few things we can, to understand the reference, the relevance of Holy Mother, personality and teachings. For that, we need a little background of feminism in India and feminism more or less in the West, especially in the United States. In India, if you look at the ancient scriptures, the Vedas, The early scriptures, Vedic literature, you find women were allowed to study the Vedas. Yajurveda Samhita has many statements which says wherever people are willing and deserving to learn the Vedas, whether women or children or princes or emperors or sages, no matter who it would be, if the person has got the humility and the sense of sanctity and sacredness, he should learn the Vedas. He has a qualification to study the Vedas, you find. So you find in the early Upanishadic literature, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, you find some of the greatest Vedic sages were women. Gargi is an example. Maitreyi was a housewife, a great women philosopher. So one of the grandest dialogues that took place in ancient Vedic times was a dialogue between Gargi and Yajnavalkya. Yajnavalkya was a saint philosopher. Gargi was an equally gifted scholar and philosopher. And the dialogue takes place in the court of an emperor, in the assembly of a large number of Pandit scholars. So I'm giving examples. So you find in the Vedic literature so many highly evolved saints, philosophers and sages among the women folk. But maybe after about 3,000, 4,000 years, the social structure changed, and you find, they say, according to modern sociologists and historians, as a response to the foreign invasions, many non-Vedic tribes entered India, things started changing, and women freedom was limited. And with the result, of course, this must happen from about 11th or 12th century AD onwards. And gradually what happened, in 19th century, when Mother was born, a number of social injustices existed. The society discriminated against the women folk. You must have heard of this child burning. It is not a terrible thing. Originally started in the early times among the Kshatriyas, kings. When they died in battle, the wife also wanted to accompany them to the next world. He must have emerged. But in 19th century, there was a horrible social system. It's called sati, and it was banned in the year 1828 when the great social reformer Raja Ram Mohan Roy came up. Now, and after that, there were many acts that were implemented in Indian constitutional history. One was the Acts of 1870, compulsory registration of births and deaths, which was again an attempt to protect the women folk. And again, Hindu Widows Remarriage Act of 1856 was another one. And then Civil Marriage Act of 1872. These constitutional revolutions did have their impact on in the history of women's rights in India. And you may have heard, one of the most powerful prime ministers the post-independence India produced was Mrs. Gandhi. He was arguably one of the most powerful administrators, prime ministers. She ranked along with Miss Golda Meir of Israel and Margaret Thatcher of England. America still has not produced a woman president. You should remind yourself. So that's where we stand today. Now, coming to the subject. In America, of course, this feminism took the form of these four waves, which I don't want to preach the choir, but still a few things to keep in the background of the personality of Holy Mother and how she promises to be an alternate paradigm, not for India alone, but for the West as well. So the first wave of feminism, for example, the first Women's Rights Convention, and then the second wave, which again was actually an attempt to assert the role of women in the mainstream media and an attempt to correct some of the impact of presenting women in the wrong way in the social media. And in the fourth wave of feminism is defined by technology according to Kira Cochrane, and is characterized particularly by the use of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc. Now I'm just giving an example of how feminism evolved in this country, and in a way, of course, they say, modern historians say, Europe was behind America in giving place to women what they deserve in the political, constitutional system, by and large. Now, in coming to Holy Mother as a paradigm, what we have to remember is today's Indian feminists and as well as modern Western feminists have both failed to appreciate this unique aspect of motherhood, or the motherhood aspect of the feminism, the motherhood aspects. So if you read the writings of modern feminists of India, don't get away with the impression that they read Holy Mother's teachings. Very rarely. They often copy and imitate what is happening in the West. So it happens both ways. So Western feminists, of course, it's natural that they may not fully understand or appreciate the writings of Margaret Noble or McLeod and Miss Beckett, Miss Legler. Many of the American ladies who happen to visit Holy Mother have written about Holy Mother in many, many articles, but still it's not easy because the social evolution in this country took a different form. But what is important is, in Holy Mother you find this feminism taking the form of motherhood, that means the motherhood aspect of woman. Now, in the Greco-Roman tradition, and also in modern Indian feminism, and also American Western feminism also, they're mostly focusing on the wife aspect of feminism. I think that's an important thing. That's an important role. But the motherhood aspect of feminism goes far beyond, it reaches the spiritual realm. That's what we find in Holy Mother. So, I was giving this example of how Holy Mother responded not only to spiritual questions, but even to questions of running an administration, running an organization, running an order. The reason was her heart was universal. And a mother's heart doesn't recognize boundaries of culture, race, color, or nationality. And not only that, when you meet a person who really considers you as her child, no matter what culture, what language you speak, what culture you are from, what nation you are from, what nationality you are from, those boundaries are completely broken. This happens only in this motherhood ideal. That's what you find in the writings of Sister Nivedita. I can give this example. Sister Nivedita writes to an American lady, Mrs. Radcliffe, "Our Holy Mother, as we call her, is only a simple Hindu woman, and yet, as I think, the greatest woman in the world today." Now, what did she find in Holy Mother? Sister Nivedita, as I mentioned to you earlier, was not the type of person who will accept the old Oriental archetype of a family-structured feminine ideal. And even Vivekananda was not very sure. He was actually a bit anxious to see whether mother will be able to accept her or not. You know, in India, Holy Mother belonged to the old conservative Orthodox Brahmanical tradition. They had their own barriers. They are not very aggressive, but it is a kind of built-in structure. Horizontal and vertical barriers. They consider that certain things are taboo, certain things are non-negotiable. This is what happens in ancient societies. They don't express it in assertive, aggressive language, but in their mind, they have prejudices, old faith systems, that's all. Okay, now, when Sister Nivedita couldn't speak her language and representing an entirely different way of life, outlook on life, so Mother, she saw in Holy Mother her own mother. That means when Mother starts looking upon a person as her child, the child also responds in the same manner. So when Vivekananda found that Mother could understand and accept Sister Nivedita as her own child, then he felt that there's no problem, and Sister Nivedita will eventually become a great spiritual person because she had the blessings of Holy Mother. So the inner experience in your own mind transmits to the other person standing in front of you. So you find a picture of Sister Nivedita going to Bodhan where Mother was living, going upstairs, and she was not sure how to greet a holy woman who was so conservative and traditional and orthodox. So, but Sister Nivedita, the moment she appeared before Holy Mother, she could see this person looks upon her as her own child. This is a kind of subjective experience which manifests in the form of a natural broad-mindedness and universality of outlook. So that's what she writes. So now Nivedita writes about Mother's broad outlook. In nothing perhaps speak more loudly than in her instant power to penetrate a new religious feeling or idea. How she appreciated and understood even the religious rituals of a different tradition of which Mother did not know anything. Most probably she had not even read about the Catholic religious rituals that Sister Nivedita is going to refer to. So this breadth of outlook, universality, and acceptance of another person's path, it doesn't come from understanding of other traditions, other religions from an academic perspective, but as a natural feeling of oneness of existence, oneness of creation, the spiritual oneness of the whole human race as one spiritual family. So you find, in nothing perhaps speak more loudly than in her instant power to penetrate a new religious feeling or idea. I first realized this gift in Holy Mother on the occasion of a visit that she paid us in recent years on the afternoon of a certain Easter day, very, very sacred for a Catholic, and she was a Catholic. Sister Nivedita was born as a Catholic. After going over our whole house, the Mother and her party expressed a desire to rest in the chapel and hear something of the meaning of the Christian festival, Easter festival. And they were all singing in English, mind you. Mother didn't know English. But when she listened to the hymns, the songs, sung in English by these English-speaking ladies, she could sense the divinity, the sacredness of the prayer, without understanding a word or meaning. So in the Chandogya Upanishad, it comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also. Interestingly, there is a wonderful description of the mystery, the sacredness of the sound symbol. Now, suppose you listen to somebody singing beautifully to music, for example. If you know something about the music, you'll be able to appreciate that sound as a music. But if you don't know anything about the music, still you'll be hearing something you'll be hearing only a sound which you will not be able to understand or appreciate or interpret as music. But if you're a fan of the particular school of music, you'll be able to appreciate and enjoy it. A spiritual person doesn't make this difference. A spiritual person, a spiritually evolved person, will be able to penetrate deeper into the spiritual dimension of a sound symbol that may be coming from any tradition. So that's what you find in the Holy Mother's writings. So, after going over our whole house, the mother and her party expressed a desire to rest in the chapel and hear something of the meaning of the Christian festival. This was followed by Easter music and singing with our small French organ. And in the sweetness of her comprehension and the depth of her sympathy with these resurrection hymns, unimpeded by the foreignness and unfamiliarity in them, we saw revealed for the first time one of the most impressive aspects of the great religious culture of Sri Sarada Devi, the Holy Mother. So this is, if I listen to, for example, if I listen to a music program from another tradition, I listen with all humility, respect, because I know it is something sacred, intellectually. But I won't be able to mentally respond to the sanctity of it the way Holy Mother could do that. The reason is, when a person reaches that level of universality and oneness, when you experience the spiritual oneness and unity of existence, this skill becomes natural. You are able to respond to the divinity of music even from a culture and tradition of which you know nothing about. And here, Sister Nivedita sums up the personality of Holy Mother. It's a very famous statement, her writings, in which she is summing up the uniqueness of Mother's personality. A yearning love that can never refuse us, a benediction that forever abides with us, a presence from which we cannot grow away, a heart in which we are always safe, sweetness unfathomed, bond unbreakable, holiness without a shadow, all this indeed and more is motherhood. So, I'm not just presenting motherhood as the only ideal in modern feminism. But along with other ideas, wonderful ideas, it evolved as a part of these 4 waves of evolution of feminism in the US, perhaps this grand idea that there is one type of the archetypal feminine person, the feminine archetype, that becomes irresistible, not because of his assertiveness or because of his combative attitude, rather because of the universality, love and affection, and looking upon the whole creation as one's own family. So that can be added maybe at a remote, distant goal. You find, surprisingly, you find in many of the ancient cultures, this idea was present. In the ancient Jewish tradition, in the Far Eastern cultural traditions, or you find in the Japanese, Korean, Chinese, different traditions, you find this ideal of feminine archetype. So the problem is it becomes too patriarchal or matriarchal, or it becomes too hierarchical. That's one problem. But once we become aware of this problem, this higher feminine archetype can be blended with the needs and demands of modern feminist groups without this combative, aggressive, over-assertive approach for equality men. They should going beyond the men. A mother alone can go beyond the archetypal masculine counterparts. So year before Nivedita passed away, she wrote to Mr. and Mrs. S.K. Radcliffe in September, "If I ever go to prison for a prolonged period, none of my friends need grieve me about, for I shall immediately take to meditation and try to climb those wonderful heights on which Holy Mother lives." I need some explanation. Sister Nivedita was a kind of a revolutionary in India at that time. So she was supporting the Indian revolutionaries who were fighting for Indian independence, the early decades of 20th century. So there was some risk, there was some possibility, some fear among the public that the government, the British government may take action against her. That is the background I'm talking about. So she writes that Holy Mother is her spiritual ideal, and if she happens to go to prison, she'll be happy to spend all her lifetime, the rest of her lifetime, meditating on the Holy Mother. She writes, "Such sweetness and serenity as hers, with such depth of experience and affection, are past all imagining. She seems more and more like the drop of water on a lotus leaf, touching the world at all points, yet undiverted by it, undeluded, filled with beatitude." Surprisingly, you find many of these ideas can be found in the writings from a different perspective, in the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila. You find it there from a different perspective. But Holy Mother is relevant for our times because she lived close to our own times. So, in a way, Holy Mother ideal can enrich modern feminist trends. Give another higher dimension to feminism, where without making a statement about it, a woman can transcend and evolve above menfolk. So that is the uniqueness of this ideal. So I have tried to give some of these views because the best way for me to describe Holy Mother's personality is by referring to the words of Sister Nivedita. It is one of the greatest events in the history of the Ramakrishna Order. How a Western woman, trained and tutored in an entirely different cultural educational setting, goes to India, a backward country at that time and a colony of the British government, looks upon an Orthodox Hindu Brahmin lady who didn't speak her language as her own mother. So spirituality transcends all barriers. Spirituality doesn't recognize the barriers and differentiations of culture, race, and nationality. There is another grand example, with that I shall conclude. On one occasion, it so happened, the mother asked one of her disciples to bring some clothes, dhotis. In those days, British government have effectively destroyed India's traditional textile industry. India was famous for its silk, muslin, finer clothes, right from almost the first millennium BC. You hear about the traders traveling to India to buy clothes and going back. So India had an ancient traditional industry, Dhaka muslin. Even today, Bangladesh produces all the wonderful clothes at cheap rates. Of course, 10-story, 20-story buildings collapse because of the security problem. That also happens. And so there was a discussion going on recently that American business groups should impose some restrictions so that workers' safety will be looked after by the industrial owners of Bangladesh. Anyway, I'm coming to that. So mother one day asked one of her disciples to bring some fine clothing. And in those days, the British have effectively destroyed the Indian textile industry. Dhotis were manufactured in Manchester. You can imagine. I don't want to go those details. There is a darker aspect of the British Empire where the sun never set because even God did not trust them in the dark. That's to say. So that comes not for me, Digole. Anyway, there's another aspect of it. The great indigo industry, Dhaka muslin, Kashmir, were all effectively destroyed and neutralized the British to make profits for the Manchester textile industry. Anyway, that's another aspect. But mother didn't bother about it. Gandhi bothered about it, so he started Gandhi, the Khadi and all that. But mother didn't bother. So mother asked one of her disciples to buy some fine clothing, by which she didn't know where it was made. Fine in those days, clothes manufactured in Manchester, worn by Indians, only Indians. So this disciple was a Gandhian, he was a patriot. So he insisted it should be one of these khadi, not of very high quality, those days handloom, Gandhi started this chakra, handloom industry, cottage industry, for giving employment to the poor cotton manufacturers of India. So, but that cloth won't be of high quality, very heavy, very thick and very rough, and easily torn. So that was not the kind of cloth that mother wanted. So for mother, that didn't make any difference. So this man bought this khadi, and mother didn't like it. I wanted you bring something good. She didn't know that good clothes will be manufactured coming from Manchester. She didn't know. So she said, I wanted something good. But this man was a patriot. He said, mother, but that's coming from England. She may have given a brief history of how the British were exploiting India's textile industry. But mother didn't listen to that. She didn't understand that kind of differentiation. She didn't look upon the British exploiters as an alien people. For her, they were also her children. I didn't worry about that. You bring good clothes. So she could think beyond even patriotism. She was patriotic in a higher sense, because she identified herself with the whole humanity, where there was no distinction between Manchester clothes and Indian clothes. So the disciple was a patriot. I must have explained to her why this textile industry was destroyed here and was transplanted into Manchester. But mother didn't want to listen to those things. For her, these things didn't matter. Not that she was not a patriot. Her love for humanity went beyond the conventional, traditional interpretations of nationality, religion, culture, patriotism. So that in a way, even those, they may be bad children, but still her children. Her own children, those children may be neutralizing industry, this textile industry in India to enrich the textile industry in Manchester. But still, they were her own children. That is the universality of spiritual motherhood. So you find many such glimpses. That's why when our Sister Nivedita came, she only saw her child. When MacLeod came, Miss Leggett came, people who didn't speak her language, could not even share the same food. They needed special arrangements because they couldn't withstand the climate. But mothers only saw her children in all of them. The boundaries of nation, boundaries of culture, race, patriotism, and its opposite, all completely vanish before mother. So that's a higher ideal, but at least it can, if modern feminists should keep in mind, at least intellectually, that there is another possibility, a higher possibility for the archetypal feminine counterparts. That is the universal motherhood that you find in the life and teachings of Holy Mother. This is an ideal, may not be able to implement all of us quickly on one day, but modern feminists can think of this as a distant, remote possibility. At least when we are aware of this distant possibility, we become more humane, we become more effective, even in asserting our rights. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.